And there we go. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's episode of Jawin with Jack. I'm the Jack you're looking for. And with me this week is Greg Christopher, the Chubby Funster. You all
How's it
know him.
going?
He's notorious for his productivity over on the DriveThruRPG. How many titles do you have up there now, Greg?
There's about 30 plus right now, but Shadow Dark stuff is about 12, and then some of them are like maps and things like that. So I'd say probably about 12 to 16 books, depending on how you count a book.
And
It's
now
it's a
most
weird time in history. What is a book? Is a 30-page PDF a book? Is a $1 supplement that's 10 pages long but adds some kind of rule clarification that you like? Is that a book? Like, it's
all
interesting.
good points.
We live in a great time where you can publish all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and and it's a double-edged sword. It's like the great thing about nowadays is anybody can get published, can put their stuff out
That's
there,
right.
and the downside is anybody can put their stuff out there.
Yep.
Now, you have discussed on some of your other shows that this is you have been especially prolific in the last couple of years. Like you had your breakout moment, and
Yep.
what do you think that coincides with Shadow Dark and publishing for that in particular, or were you starting to really tick up in other areas before the advent of Kelsey?
It was coincided with Kelsey. Um, a lot of it was also that I started using really effective ADD drugs, particularly methylphenidate, and that made me able to go from being an absent-minded professor to somebody who could finish the project and stay focused. And so there's just kind of a confluence of those two fortunate things, neither of which are really under my control in a sense. Like, it just kind of evolved that way. I didn't plan on it, and I had a bunch of stuff from Ambition and Avarice that I wanted to convert it. I was going to convert it to OSC, and then the Wizards of the Coast decided that they were going to step on their dick big time and
Yeah.
have this huge OGL crisis. And Kelsey launched Shadow Dark, and that was like, well, maybe now's the opportunity time to open this to Shadow Dark. And so I took it, and I had a lot of stuff in Ambition and Avarice, like the equipment and ideas like spell catalysts and trophies and things that I was ready to move over, and there was an open equipment slot, and I slid into that equipment slot. So it worked.
The match made in heaven, practically.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to rewind back to you in your personal history a little bit. How did you get started in role-playing games? What was your first game? How did you get started? What was it like for you?
My first role playing game session was Rifts. I went to a summer camp that was like you were away from home for 6 months or 6 weeks in the wilderness, and they had like cabins, like you lived in kind of like you had a counselor and 7 other kids in your cabin, but it was pretty, no TV, no electronics, no, it was pretty rough. And there was a guy who was running. I knew that these kids were playing games up in this particular place, and I was like, I'm gonna go check out what they're doing. And they were playing Rifts, and Rifts was a little bit too advanced for me when I was like 13, but
Okay.
very quickly I found through that game other kids who were playing second edition D&D, which had really taken off at that point. And so I still have my second edition books that I got. That was a big thing for me. And then I added a whole bunch of more stuff. But yeah, second edition D&D was really the first real gateway.
That's where you got your start and did it seriously. Well, that's a great place to start. After D&D, what were the other games that you delved into? Like, were there other genres that particularly called to you? Modern, sci-fi, horror, what have you?
I had a group of friends that were into games like Fate and Donjon and some of the early story game stuff. Spirit of the Century, and we played some of those games, and then I kind of drifted away from those people as I got older because I valued things that I would eventually come to see as old school revolution stuff, old school Renaissance, whatever. And then I didn't like the authorial control that people had in the story game side of things, and the friends that I was playing with really enjoyed that. So there was kind of like a period where I became gradually kind of disaffected a little bit, and then I eventually just broke off and started playing online with people like Eric Tenkar, and
Okay.
yeah, and I kind of got into the blogging scene right before Google Plus was a thing, and then when Google Plus hit, that kind of brought my cachet up, however you want to say, like I was becoming more known in the community, and I wrote a series of free games just to kind of practice my craft. And then eventually
Nice.
Ambition and Avarice was the first game that I charged for. So
Nice. So you had a couple of iterations of other RPGs that you designed and published, more on the test in the field.
yeah, they were not very good, so that's why they're no longer available.
Well,
But
it's
you
good
got
to
to
be able to
learn.
admit that about yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to learn. That's the way it is.
Yeah, yeah. Similarly, back in high school, I designed a system that kind of worked technically, but it was really boring, and so that kind of like satisfied my bug for game design. I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm particularly good at this. I think I'm an idea man more than anything.
I have, in general, every game that I make has some kind of like idea that I'm playing with, maybe building most of the thing around that idea. So one of the first game that I wrote was called Synapse, because I really liked how Jason Bourne combat was in the Jason Bourne movies, and I wanted to move away from kind of a D&D round type system to a combat that would be very, very small units of time. Like this
Mm-hmm.
is what they're doing, and that was very hard to do. I was clumsy at doing it, and that game also had like a big list of motivations that each character had, and they were ranked kind of like I didn't know this at the time, but kind of like virtues in Pendragon. And
Okay.
so you could appeal to somebody's motivation like greed or pride or whatever, and then that would change how the charisma check, so to speak, would work. And so those kind of ideas where I was like, this is going to be great. I did all this stuff. You bite off more than you can chew. You're not good at doing it. But yeah, that's kind of the thing is like every game, I wrote a game called Statecraft where you were a character that was like the ruling dynasty of a country. And your character sheet was kind of like your country. And you would interact with
Wow.
other people because I really loved this video game called Europa Universalis, which was big multiplayer game for me at the time, and that playing out those ideas. But so all of them, they were good for me to write. They were very helpful in terms of honing your craft. It's like the people talk about the 10,000 hour rule or other things like that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you have to put in a lot of work in order to bring your skill level up. You're not gonna walk off the street never having cooked anything in your life and become top chef either. Like that's just
It just
not
doesn't
gonna
happen
happen.
that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
It just doesn't
You gotta
happen.
make a lot of crappy meals first. That don't work. So yeah, I am a
We
nerd. I am a huge nerd.
we own that. So, uh, 2E is the best edition to start with. AD&D 1E is the best edition to play. It is objectively true. Well, all right. I am
I'm not
always
gonna
going to have.
argue. But people love all sorts of different stuff. Whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I won't back up it's objectively true. I can see where you can say 1E is my jam and that's what I prefer to play.
Yeah.
It is not the optimum gaming experience for me. I get a headache when I run 1E.
Now, second edition D&D does have some major mechanical issues. My friend Joe the Lawyer, if you know who he is, he has a
great
YouTube channel called Joe's Analog Man Cave. And he tried to run second edition, and he at first he was like, hey, we're going to run it by the book. We're going to run it by the book. And then the more we ran it by the book, hey, Todd, what's up? The more we ran it by the book, we realized that we don't want to run this by the book. Like he ended up making like 20-page document of house rules.
Wow.
Of all the things that he wanted to change, because there were so many things that at the time might have been really interesting things to do. But now looking back, we go, well, that's really a bad way of doing that particular thing. So we're going to do it this way. Yeah.
Was it the core rules themselves, or was it the splat books and expansions?
The only splat book that we used was the Forgotten Realms. There's I think it's the Deities is the name of the book, but it has all of these classes in it that are specialty priests. And he made a rule that nobody could be a cleric. Everybody had to be a specialty priest with specified spheres, so that you had limited access to the magic. And
that was one of the books I used extensively in my 2E days. And that was my experience is the splat books, particular ones, of course, like the fighter book and the priest book. I really appreciated what they added to the game. But we did precious little of just the core books. There was almost always expansion books. And over the years, that's kind of been my take on every edition that's come out is the 3 core books, pretty solid. You can run a great campaign using just them, but then every edition gets ruined by expansion book. All the way back to 1E, Unearthed Arcana ruined the 1E experience.
Yeah, they introduce stuff that they don't consider how it interacts with all kinds of other things. And then there not only is there kind of an interaction back with the core rule book, but there's interactions between the splat books. So something that might be perfectly fine in the fighter's book might suddenly interact with what's in the thieves book, and then that becomes a game-breaking problem. So I get why it happens. You just the GM has to be cautious about letting people just say, well, whatever, if it's in a splat book, because you could get all kinds of stuff that ends up being. I don't really care that much about balance per se, but it just becomes like I think of in terms of like video game terms, like an exploit where you're breaking the spirit of the game. If there's a prestige class in some 3rd edition book that's more powerful technically than the other prestige classes, like, okay, I can live with that. But if the prestige class allows you to transmute rock to gold, then that becomes a big problem. So that kind of exploitive loopholes that get created by these rules that they didn't consider intersecting, that's an issue.
That is true. And maybe it's a perception on my part, but it feels like the later books in whichever edition, whichever one we're talking about, are usually the stuff that sees the least amount of play testing before they published it.
And a lot of it isn't developed. One of the things that I think a lot of people don't take into account is that the people who wrote the core books have often moved on to other projects. And the people who are writing the splat books are not that they're worse writers, but they're kind of like the second tier writers for that, whatever that company is, right? So
I was about to call them second string.
So if let's just use Wizards of the Coast, like if they've moved people like Jeff Grubb and Monty Cook or whoever onto the next project, and then they're leaving these other freelance writers in their stable to do that stuff. I have a hard enough time coming back to my own work and remembering all of the intersections of different things. It would be very hard to come into somebody else's work and remember notice all of the little possible connections.
Yes.
That's very challenging. I think that's also part of it is, so like the company has their powerhouse writers develop the core book, then they move them on to the next thing, whatever that is, and then all these supplements are being written by people who do not grasp the core material as well as the original writing staff.
I think that's a really telling point. And on the one hand, it's they can't get the core writer all the time, but at the same time, you really see how it damages the overall quality of the brand, And like we have Todd here, DM Blackwall, and Horde Wars is kind of on the opposite end of that spectrum. If you're in their gilded server, you see all the activity. They're constantly running games. They're refining things, making changes, and I feel similarly about Axe. McCrease does a great job of not just writing very detailed rules; he play tests them thoroughly before sending them out, which is, my love in the original editions are those Beck Me box sets, but let's be honest, the later boxes feel like they didn't play test anything.
Yep, I know how it goes. I see a question from Cyrus. If you want to pull it up, yeah. I definitely do an outline for a game. Usually, what I do is, for a while, I'll have an idea, and on my phone, I start drawing up a little note document. So, the note document contains all the things. I would say, like, a lot of what I deal with in my life in writing is passing notes to the future Greg that I don't know yet. And so the current Greg is going to forget a lot of things. So I have to preserve the notes to pass them on to future Greg. And so I'll write down the things so that I don't have to remember what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot, so like I was recently watching, my wife and I have been going through Sopranos. We watched the first few seasons, but we never really got into it. But my wife really is running out of things to watch, and I don't really have that problem. I play video games and do stuff. I just watch whatever we're laying in bed or eating lunch or whatever. We'll watch whatever she wants to watch. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been watching it, and in the first episode of the final season, we just started going through it, and the guy mentions that the ancient Egyptians conceived of the soul as having 7 layers, and and they kind of go into it as a parable in the story, and I knew that was true, but I wasn't actively thinking about it. And I also have been struggling with something I'm writing right now about how to differentiate between these certain things in how the magic and the religious system interacts. And so I went on my phone and I grabbed the Wikipedia link for that, and I Discorded it to myself so that future Greg would remember to use that and go back to that Wikipedia article and be like, okay, this is going to be the solution for how I do it in this. But like, I'm constantly having to pass things forward to future Greg. So I make a notepad on my phone and I start designing whatever it is. I come up with, let's say, let's do these attributes, and these are going to be the classes, and these are going to be the whatever it is, and then outline it out to some basic level. And when I'm sitting in a doctor's office, when I'm stuck somewhere, I'll just open it up and think of a couple things and add, and they'll slowly build. And then when it reaches a certain critical point, I copy the whole note and email it to myself, and then I move it onto the computer. And once it's on the computer, it starts to be built out more aggressively. Yes, future Greg is a bird and fellow. Yes.
He's got a lot on his to-do list.
I send him a lot of notes. Otherwise, I would just forget it.
I find it really interesting to hear that process and recognize a lot of my own behaviors in that sense, because I too am one to send notes to future Jack. And I really appreciate, though, hearing an element I miss is you keep adding on little bits, and then it sort of hits a critical mass where you can sit down and start to organize it for real.
That's right.
You know,
And then eventually it goes into Adobe InDesign, and I'll do the layout. To me, the graphics are an enormous part of my visualization of whatever it is. So if the thing that I'm working on now, Shadow City is in the can. It's done. I'm doing promotional stuff about it and talking about it, but I'm not writing it anymore. The day-to-day writing is going into a game called Karizim, which is like a Al-Qadim adaptation. But the Arabian part of this setting is only one of 8 provinces. The other provinces have all these different Islamic cultures, like Turkish, Persian, Northern India, Hindu Kush, all these different places. The Sogdians, if anybody knows about them, stuff like that. And so I'm constantly building out the graphics ahead of time. I make a map. I do my own map work. Making the map is a huge part of visualizing the setting, about how it interacts together. I'm a huge history buff. I play games like Europa Universalis and Crusader Kings and Civilization, and I think in that graphical way, relativistic positioning way. And this country's going to be here, and there's going to be a mountain range, and it's going to do this. And then I start building the layout design in InDesign, and I take all the notes from my outline, however big they are, small they are, and then I begin building out the sections. So I'll make the page for each class, even when the only thing I have is one sentence about what this class is going to be like, right? So one of the classes in this one is called a dervish. So it's dervish is a Sufi kind of meditation practice, and they do the dancing as part of the meditation. It's like meditation through movement.
Hence the term whirling
that's
dervish.
The historical part of being a dervish. But the Magic the Gathering and other types of things have turned the dervish into like a whirling warrior type concept.
Right.
So I have this character who can do meditative practices to get benefits for themselves, and then they also have kind of like whirlwind attack battle mechanics. And so I have just like 2 or 3 sentences, and I just write that on the page for dervish.
Right.
And I build all the pages, and then whatever I'm inspired to write, it's never gonna be in linear order. So one day I'm gonna be inspired to write some part about one of the landforms or something over here, and then another day I'll go all the way back to the dervish and I'll add some things for dervish, and then I'll go. So the whole book gets written simultaneously in all of these little bits all over the place throughout the layout. But the layout is its own kind of writing outline medium.
Right.
It structures the book. There's going to be a character creation section, and then there's going to be a magic spells section, and then there's going to be a kind of a gazetteer section, and then I forgot to mention the equipment section is going to be right after character generation. So the book is being built in like Lego pieces all over the place at once, rather than following some kind of linear pattern of being developed. And that is, I think, a big part of how I can write as quickly as I do, because I don't go through. I haven't had really hard writer's block in a long, long time.
Wow.
The only thing that I would call writer's block is when I'm having a hard time coming up with a number of examples of a particular thing. So like in Shadow City at the end, the last thing that I did, because it was the thing that took me the longest to get through, was coming up with all these different pieces of treasure. And the game is set, it starts in the 80s and it rolls forward, and you got to coming up with treasure items that are like $3,000, $4,000, but portable in 1981 that's a challenge. And so it wasn't
Yeah.
like it was writer's block per se. It was just struggling to think of, how many things can I put in this list.
Right. Yeah. Right.
It
Yeah.
wasn't like I don't know what I want, or I'm not sure how this rule should work, or whatever. Like it was just a really hard thing to put together.
I've
Um,
also
yeah,
heard you say recently you discussed how, like, man, there's moments where, okay, I've got a D100 table and I've got the first 20 or something filled in. I've got to get entries for the rest of that table. And that sounds like one of those instances. So it's like, okay, entry
yeah,
one is a large diamond, entry two is a large emerald.
that's
You know,
right. It starts to
how much,
get hard.
right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. And
I mean, coming up with encounter tables can get that way when you get near the end, and you start to get tapped out. I found one of the biggest kind of skills for working in the RPG medium, and this is true just for being a GM.
mhm.
But it's particularly true. Sorry, my chair is not cooperating with me today. Um, the the skill that you will get a ton of benefit out of is being able to take some kind of literary or artistic idea and removing whatever the setting content is from it and turning it into a pure mechanical relationship between characters or ideas, and then changing the setting and building it back up. So one of the examples in Shadow City was I went through a whole bunch of Law and Order episode summaries. And there was an episode of Law and Order where this woman gets into an argument with a guy and runs out into the street and gets hit by a car. And then the driver drives off. And so the problem from the detective standpoint is they don't even know there was a guy that she argued with. They're not looking for him. They're looking for some random guy who who isn't even at fault in this whole interaction. So the show is them tracking that down. Well, if you break it down into basic concepts like there's an argument, the people separate, a disaster happens to one of the people, and then that casts a shadow on a different person. So now people are looking at the wrong person that they should be looking at. That has nothing to do with New York or Law and Order or anything. Then you could take that idea and put it into Star Wars. You could put it into Conan. You could put it anything. You can port that idea. That is what is a fundamental skill as a GM, coming up with ways of changing things around on the fly.
that is
But yeah, but
that
from a
is
writing
excellent.
perspective, it is a killer skill.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a beautiful way of doing things, and I love the fact that you were just able to break it down into a very systematic process. Because I know I've done something similar, like taken the premise or something from a sci-fi movie and tried to and just crammed it into D&D by
yeah,
changing. Well, instead of sci-fi tech, it's magic that does this thing or what have you. But I love the fact that you really broke it down into, strip away the setting, time, connotations and context from it and describe what the events are, because then you're creating something modular that can be plugged in anywhere.
that's right.
And
And I think one of the problems that we have in modern writing for Hollywood and video games and stuff like that is that they can't see through that. And so they keep replicating the same stuff over and over again. They feel like all they need to do is just change that surface element so that the woman running out of the apartment is a different race, or one of them has some minor difference in their demographics or profession or whatever, and they just keep regurgitating crap, but they don't see
yeah,
the bones underneath why the story works. So when they do it, it doesn't work. and they couldn't see, for instance, this is not my original analysis here at all, right? They couldn't see that Rey in Star Wars Episode 7, 8, and 9 needed to follow a path similar to Luke Skywalker.
Right.
And that path involved going through a time of hardship, going and working on training, having the humility to face your own arrogance. Like when, with a awesome scene on Dagobah where Yoda says, "That is why you fail." You are so thinking wrong. You need to change that before you can move forward as a hero. All that stuff they stripped out, and they just let Rey walk through every challenge and just solve it magically. And they thought, oh, that's what Luke Skywalker did. Like, no, that is not what Luke Skywalker did, right? Because they don't see the bones underneath the skeleton of this structure. All they see is the skin. And so they can't understand why their story doesn't work, why nobody thinks it's interesting. They haven't read things like Joseph Campbell, understanding why these stories even work in the first place.
Right. What's the appeal? What is it about that resonates with so many people that made it such a huge hit in the late 70s?
Yeah. And
little
scenes like there's a scene, I brought this up a few times. I think it's one of the most important scenes in Star Wars, but it's not credited by almost anybody that I've ever seen. Maybe Critical Drinker would talk about it, but there's a scene where R2 has run off into the desert, and Luke is standing there watching the twin sunsets, and there's the music, and you see him kind of struggling with, what is it that I'm going to do in my life? Am I going to pursue this thing with Obi-Wan? How am I going to get this? There's so many things going on in his head, but in terms of visuals and cinematography, you're just seeing him. It's not an action scene.
No,
he's just sitting. Like, you can see what he's struggling with, and it's an important part of his character. But that's exactly the thing that they'll cut now, because they don't know why that scene is even important.
Yes. Yeah. And yet, so many times they will include a similar filler sort of a shot, a scene, whatever, just staring off into the sunset, but they haven't set up the same meaning and context.
They haven't showed him arguing with his uncle and being frustrated constantly about the menial work he has to do, and that he keeps talking aspirationally about getting out into the rebellion. Like, all those things are not done. So then when you're just standing there looking at the sunset, it doesn't mean anything now. Yeah, right. That's a great point.
And it underscores what you were just saying, is that because the sequel trilogy lacked those moments and that kind of writing and depth, we never developed the bond with Rey. We never get a chance to. Right. She hardly even has enough screen time for us to do that.
Yeah. And I kind of I view it now when I look at shows. There's characters that if somebody just walked up and shot him in the head and walked off, my reaction would be like, yeah, got him. You know,
right.
Like I don't care about this character at all. Whereas, like, to stick with Sopranos, like, if somebody shoots Tony, I actually do care about Tony. But there's other characters that they haven't developed, or they've poorly developed. Yeah, you're like, I don't even care if this person, they don't matter. There's no reason. And that's because they keep adding these characters with no thought about what role they're supposed to really be playing in the story of Tony Soprano, or the story of Rey, or the story of whoever. And so all of these people, they're just like meaningless. It's like battle droids. I don't care if they die. I just don't care.
Yes.
There's no impact at all. In fact, it may be humorous for me to watch them die. Because I care that little.
Yeah, and some shows I've seen it where they make a character just so unlikable that I'm glad when they finally get removed from the continuity. Now, we've dwelled a little bit here for a few minutes on Hollywood is shit, totally agreement.
Yeah.
Now, let's go to the flip side. What are some recent films, TV shows, books, what have you, media that are doing it right and are good inspiration?
I don't know that there's that many. The
Good.
first season of Mandalorian, to stick with Star Wars, was a bright spot, but it was a trick, and then they screwed us over in the later season. So I don't know, but it is helpful to look at why it was good. So having a character who is of questionable ethics or intent is very common. Tony Soprano, for instance.
Right.
But when you put that character in positions where even their morality causes problem, I can't kill this little Yoda thing. I'm gonna, it humanizes them. It makes you, empathize with them. You see the parts of the character that are being concealed by the exterior. Like, this guy's supposed to be a big badass, but he actually cares about this one place or this one person or this one animal or whatever. John Wick's dog, stuff like that. There's something that they care about, and when you cross that line, that is very critical. And that's why I like to steal from my player characters when I GM them, because if you steal from characters, they will chase whoever stole from them to the end of the earth.
Yes.
Whereas all other problems are viewed as kind of, maybe I'll pursue this, maybe not. But if you take 10 gold pieces out of their pocket, they will chase you forever, right?
They will chase you to another plane of existence. That's will. Right.
Put them in a position where they're hard, brutal. Oh, I'm a big, tough bounty hunter, badass, and I was, oh, well, will you kill this little cute thing? No, I'm not going to do that, and one of the big reasons why, like, Wizards of the Coast stuff sucks is that they took out all of the evil that might make you want to fight, might make you want to go deal with these problems. Why would you go down in this dark cave that is very scary? Well, if the things that are in the cave are coming out and killing people in your town, or they're doing this stuff, but if you just make everybody into a soft, squishy friend, then why would you do any of this stuff?
Right. And very much so. I really agree with that sentiment, because and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I see this trend in a lot of recent anime shows that cross my path of, it's a world that's just not believable in any kind of context. Like, dungeons just exist for adventurers to loot for treasure, and that's it. Like, it's really simulating a video game more than any kind of real world simulationism or verisimilitude. And it's and it can be entertaining in its own way, I guess, but it's really off-putting in terms of fiction.
Yeah. Alexander McCrease has a whole thing about verisimilitude and having I forget there's some arcane word he has for when you recognize that the thing was logical and that there's a reason why it worked this particular way. By the way, before I forget, I totally agree with Alchemic Raker here. That is the part of superheroes that you care about. And that's why you wish you had those abilities yourself, but you very rarely imagine that you're not you with those abilities. You imagine that, I want to be able to jump around like Spider-Man, but I want to stay me.
Right. And that's an interesting thing to explore, because on the other hand, in a fantasy world, like if we're playing 5e or 6e or whatever, what have you, you're playing a much more magically empowered, almost super powered character, but it's distinctly not you, lives in a completely different world. Whereas when you role play a superhero game, the context is usually similar or the same as our world. And I think that very much more strongly evokes what you were just talking about, that, oh, well, this is me. What would I do if I was super strong and could climb walls and stuff, or if I could fly,
Yeah.
that would not change. I got my mortgage, my insurance payments. I need to, my kids need braces or whatever you're actually doing in life. And we know that that's been mentioned numerous times in the past. Is
Yep.
that was the whole point of Spider-Man, was he was still had normal problems he was grappling with, and that was a creative breakthrough for that day and age.
He had problems at work, problems with his girlfriend, stuff like that. Yeah. And one of my biggest criticisms of settings like Forgotten Realms is that they introduce what would be world-changing things into the way people interact. The availability of magic, things, the threat levels that are outside of, just within 3 miles of this metropolis. There's massive, dangerous things like. The metropolis would never suffer that. It would,
right.
would have murdered anything that was possibly around it close like that. In a way, Waterdeep would do the same thing.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense that they would suffer these things, or that you would leave a metropolis and then go down to the river, and by the river there's just like 10 people living in a hut, and you're like, wait a minute.
Hey, yeah. Well,
there are not any small towns right next to Paris. Like it doesn't
they just
work like
got
that.
absorbed. Yeah. Those are called suburbs. That's what that's called.
So, stuff like that, or the way that they'll introduce all kinds of, magic in particular. Like if you could just create water, that would really change how desert economies would work. If you had, you could be maybe 5th to 7th level, and you would have decanters of endless water, right? Like you can, yeah. And how many of those would you need to make before you would not have any problem settling the entire desert? And
if memory, if memory serves, in
changes.
the newest rules, create water, it's just a cantrip, so you could just do it over and over and
That's
over
right.
again, as long as it's in. So you are the decanter of endless water from first level. There's, which means, well, that gives me an adventure hook idea. Is you're a cleric and you have that create water thing, and you get kidnapped by desert nomads who then squirrel you out into the desert because they're going to use you to make an oasis.
There's a Firefly episode that's almost like that. Right, where they take her and they want her to be him to be the doctor, and then they accuse what's her name of being a witch, River. There's a lot of things you could do with that. Yeah, they'll kidnap you and run off with you.
Now, something you just said too about really pinged with me, and it led to a question. You were just discussing how, well, look, like 5 miles outside of Waterdeep, there's the tomb of the Lich King, or whatever the heck it is, right? 5 miles away. And while you're right on the one hand that, the city of Waterdeep will not tolerate that. They're going to be sending, Blackstaff himself is going to go deal with that kind of thing, or what have you. The flip side, I find, is also true. There's very little intelligent treatment of the bad guy, the villain in that scenario. Like, so the Lich King, who's been around for thousands of years and is just a couple miles away from Waterdeep, he hasn't done anything like that. Everything is a Dune story. I think that's a truism that we can live by. If you take just like there's so many degrees of separation from here to Kevin Bacon, everything is a Dune story when you boil right down to it.
There's a lot more than the original book too. There's all those other books.
Yeah. I've only read up through God Emperor myself, which I actually enjoyed. A lot of people dump on that, but God Emperor was my favorite Dune book, ironically.
I read 2 or 3 of them when I was in college, but I can't remember clear enough. But I recognize a lot of the stuff that I read in the movies, so I think it was the early books. But
very much
hard
so.
to remember what you read 25 years ago.
Right, yeah. And I generally have a good retention of things I read, but I found the second book, Dune Messiah, to be eminently forgettable. And then Children of Dune was pretty good. I liked what they did in that one. And then I found God Emperor just so weird, and it was such a leap going 3,000 years into the future and thinking about, well, how have things changed in the Empire? So I thought, for whatever flaws, I can see where most people were like, well, I hated the fact that he jumped 3,000 years in the future. There's no continuity in the story anymore. But it was personally me. But back to my original question, do you have a process or a method with which you explore bad guys, your villain, and their motivations, their plans? Like, so often the Lich King is just sitting in his tomb, twiddling his thumbs, waiting for adventurers to show up to try to kill him.
In my setting called Terra Invictus, which came out in March, the last 2 pages is a spread on villains, and there are 10 villains plus 5 dragons, which are really villain. They're their own kind of special villain, and each entry details what their goals are. Right. So there's a guy who he found a big tomb, underground tomb, like think Terracotta Warriors type too, with all of these guys that were left behind to guard the person that was being buried. And he is slowly animating them. And the entry for the hex that he's in just says this is how many skeletons he has right now. But in the villain part of the book, it says, every month he's going to be gaining this many skeletons. So like if the PCs just don't choose to even go in, that, not like they're deliberately ignoring him, they could just not go out into that hex. And then all of a sudden, by the time they find him, he's got 70, 100, 150 skeleton, like serious threat. And then eventually it says, I think it's like after 6 months or so, he marches on this nearby town and just takes it over.
Right. So your method is you've thought those out, given these characters explicit goals, and then even provided guidelines and a timeline of sorts as to this is what should happen if the players do nothing.
Yep. And some of them are not timed, they're interest based. So spoiler alert, but there's a huge war in the setting between kind of a French type country and kind of a Iberian type country. It's not exactly Spain, it's not exactly France. It's they're shaded that way. And there are different things you can find that are clues to this truth, but the entire war was arranged by a very powerful devil. And he lives in a mountain castle that's in the mountain range that forms part of the border between these two countries. So he goes over to one side and stirs up shit, and he comes back, and then he goes over to the other side and stirs up shit and comes back. And he wants them to keep fighting each other. And so if the players start trying to broker a peace, then he's going to come after them. But there's no time limit on that. He wants the war to just go on interminably. But as soon as the players intersect with his goal, then he becomes a part of their life real quick. And so there's all these definitions like that. There's a beholder. It's eye tyrant, because I have to protect Wizards' IP.
Oh yeah, they need the protection.
The eye tyrant is blinding everybody it captures in one eye, and then there's some kind of magical ability where once it blinds them in that one eye, from then on, at will, it can look through the eye socket that it destroyed. So this beholder can just see everywhere all at once. He just keeps focusing on a different person that he's blinded, and he has the most information of anyone on the map. He has this big cult that follows him. He's next to the devil, he's probably the most powerful monster on the map, and the information advantage that he has is colossal. Like he'll know that the players are coming up the mountain to find his temple. He knows that they've been over here. He knows that they've been over there.
He's
he may
literally an all-seeing eye.
Yeah, he may tell the dragon that they're over here, and then the dragon goes and F's them up. Like who knows? The guy is almost omniscient because he's blinded so many random people that he's then released back into the population.
And yet, if the PCs find themselves in need of a specific piece of information on anybody else, that he's the prime person to go to. Yeah. So have you covered that aspect in
I leave things like that to the GM because it's, I can only anticipate so many levels of interaction. But that's one of the things that I think is important in module design is how the thing, even if it's just like a keep on the Borderlands location, the thing is going to change over time. If you go in and you kill everything on level 1, and then you go and take 4 months to level up and train and do all sorts of stuff, when you come back, it's not going to be empty still. Right. And things like that. Things change over time. If you disrupt the balance between two kind of villains that are working against each other, the one that you weaken goes away, and then the other one becomes way stronger. So those kind of realistic changes should be pushed through by the GM. I think it's important for modules to highlight that for the inexperienced GM,
right,
to know that this is what they should be looking for.
Now, and I really enjoy hearing that perspective. How does that inform your philosophy on keeping time records during your own games when you're running a game or something like that?
Typically, I don't have the cognitive load to keep track of time as much as I might. However much I want to, I'm not going to get up to that, whatever it is. So I try to jot notes down at like the end of the session when I'm not actively thinking anymore, and been like, okay, it's been 3 days. Right now I'm running Gods of the Forbidden North for my Saturday night group. And to make it more challenging, I had them arrive right before the start of winter rather than in the spring when would be nicer weather. This is
prime exploration time.
Yeah, so every day is freezing cold, and they're making hypothermia checks, and it's really intense, right? But in order to make that happen, I have to really keep track. How many days is it going to be like this, and then it's going to change over. And so I try to be very, at the beginning of this session, right? When I'm doing my prep, I make a note in my little reminder file of like, all right, I go ahead and pre-roll. I think it's going to rain, and then it's going to snow, and then it's going to do this. And so I don't have to make those checks while we're playing. And then after I get done with the session, I adjudicate it. But I don't know if this is just my personal thing, or I like the idea of one-to-one time and Broasar type stuff in terms of managing the campaign, but it's very difficult for me to see how that I would make that work in reality. So like there's sessions, there's going to be tons of sessions where they don't end back in town, where they don't end in a place where we can let time flow again.
Right. And the must of that really doesn't start to take place until you have multiple parties working within the same campaign, and they can run into the consequences. Your whole life is detention, Pung King. Your whole life.
He got into a pun off with Grok the other day. Were you copied on that?
Yeah.
It was like 400 exchanges with Grok every 15 minutes, I'm getting a reminder that Grok
I
has
muted
replied.
that shit.
Oh
after
my God,
the first hour or two, I muted it and said, I'm moving on with my life, man. I love it. I'm pretty sure Grok is going to have more endurance for this than me.
Yeah. Now, I said everything I said about 1-to-1, but if people play it like that, I think that that's admirable. That there's people who play who are very rigorous about keeping track of time in the dungeons, far more than I am.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that is just my brain is so busy focused on other. Yes, he was using a bot. That's true, Punking. But yeah, like when I'm running the game, my brain just can't process that much time calculation unless it's related to a specific thing. So like, they've touched this statue, so for in 10 minutes this change is going to happen. So I have to keep track of time really rigorously until that change takes place, and then I can kind of be more loose.
Right. Yeah. I really see that too. And I find that my personal practices fall along the same way, since I'm not running an expansive campaign with multiple parties in the same, that could interact with one another. I tend to I'll run a campaign, we'll play for 2 or 3 months, and in game that may just be a few days or a couple of weeks, right? But then we finish whatever that story arc, dungeon, plot point, or whatever, and then I tend to say, okay, there's a little bit of downtime, and I say, okay, it's been 2 or 3 months. You guys have done training, doing your stuff, and so I tended to keep my campaigns more or less 1-to-1 time, but not strictly speaking like measuring days and weeks. Just kind of saying, okay, our last adventure, it took us 3 months of sessions to play through, and now here's the next part. It's 3 months later. What have you guys been up to? That sort of thing.
Well, I have noticed in the Gods of the Forbidden North game that the brutality of the winter is getting so intense that there were several times when they were talking amongst themselves and they were kind of like, we have the gold. We should just go to town and just wait for 2 months because this is crazy. They were like, how much gold do I have to spend per day? And then like, if I buy food and I do this, and I could see them making the calculations. But unfortunately for them, they kept causing problems that made it so they couldn't really lay low. The guards were looking for them for a thing that they did. And, so I was like, well, you could stay here for a month, but the guards are going to eventually figure out that you're living here. You know how it is. They go in with the best intentions, and 25 people end up dead. It happens.
Yeah, these things happen. I slipped.
It's an accident.
Mass murder.
Because what happens is they get into a situation and they threaten somebody, and then that guy draws steel, and then now it's like, well, we're committed to murdering all 25 of these people now because we can't just murder 5 and walk out. We gotta go get them all.
And we've all been there. We know that experience. We've all had to go to Walmart on a Saturday night or something like that.
Yeah. Well, Ultra asked about Gods of the Forbidden North. I'll use it as an example. So I like to use it as an example because it's not my stuff. So when I lavish praise on it, doesn't sound like I'm pumping my own stock up.
Right.
So I'm friends with Rob Alderman. He actually has played in the game that I'm running a few times. He misses a lot of sessions because he's a busy dude, but he's played in there. We were running it with my game, Ambition and Avarice, which is that was my reminder to take out the trash tonight. How
dare you talk about me that way?
Yeah, we've been playing using Ambition and Avarice 1, which is very light, old school essentials type level of detail. So we were seeing if we could run it with that instead of OSC. and doing that. So Rob's been involved. So we've been playing it in a very unconventional way. I've been trying to keep Rob on his toes when he's in the, having things work differently from how it's written and so on. But I think it's a good example of how to say, like, these are the things that are really good about a particular product, like you were saying earlier about movies or fiction or whatever. That just the act of reading the product, it has enough detail and really interesting development that even as the GM, you are very interested in continuing to turn that page. Things are every single part of the game is very intriguing, right? And it makes you want to keep learning more. So it's not like, oh, there's some people and they worship a sun god. Like, no. It's very well developed religions that are complex and really cool. There's one of them that has like levels like Scientology that you have to like build up to learn more about the religion. There's one that is kind of like Holy Roman Catholicism, where it's just like a triumvirate of related deities, like the Trinity, and you're communicating with one, but there's all these nuances to how it manifests its magic in the world and how this and that works. So when you read it, you're not like, oh, this is just Roman Catholicism, it's just a carbon copy. No, like, it's different. And in running it in Roll20, I've been there's like handouts, I think is the term in Roll20, where you can make just a text document that you share with the players or whatever. And so like when they encounter a lot of these religious concepts, I like put it in a document and make it for them. Like, you need to understand, this is not like a generic sun god. Like, this is an important deity for you to get the details of.
Right.
They find
adventures. If you do or say the wrong thing, you can end up with much more trouble than you anticipated.
That's right. And then there's parts of the map where you can move very quickly across great distances. And then there are other parts where it would be very, very slow going and difficult to move. So that creates kind of a mix of, well, if we go to that place, it's going to take a long time. We have to go through the swamp and it's very treacherous. That's risky. Otherwise, we could just take this nice road, right? And then he throws out, this is another thing I think is really important for role-playing game design in general, lots of hooks and things for you to be interested in, not just one thing that your characters are focused on, right? So you have at the beginning, I'm not really spoiling anything here, but you or very early on, you get like an amulet that is very useful for a particular thing. There's a guy who wants to get it from you. And so you're trying to deal with this guy pursuing you. And there's all these new things that are being opened up simultaneously the more you interact with the world. So you have to decide, am I going to continue I need to get rid of this guy who's chasing me, or I need to use this amulet, or I need to do what? Or am I going to sell it and just run away and then deal with the consequences of that guy getting the amulet or things like that? So there's all these different interactions that can occur. And I've tried to do the same thing in Terra Invictus, and a lot of my work, a lot of my stuff like the GM Companion is about giving tables to people to generate their own things like that, the rumors and things for the players to pursue. So I think there's all that kind of stuff that is an important part of a product. And, I definitely recommend that you get it, Ultra. It's a very big, it's a 3-book trilogy. He hasn't come out with the 3rd book yet. The books are very high quality. So if you want to save money, go with PDF or something, but excuse me. But it's a great thing. There's all kinds of little details. When I get a product now as a creator, I'm looking at all kinds of these little fine points about the thing. How is this parts of the layout, the way the information is put together. One of the things that Rob does is at the end of every chapter, he has these charts that show every possible way of getting experience in that area. So like there's a dungeon, and then at the end it says, you could get 400 XP for getting that necklace, and
Nice.
you could get this much XP for killing these monsters, and you could get this. So when the players are leaving, you can go down that list and make sure you've awarded everything that you're going to award them. Stuff like that. I look for things like that, ways of improving it. There was a guy, I think his name is Rolf, like a Scandinavian spelling of Rolf. But he wrote Atomic Shadows, I think it is. It's for Shadow Dark. And one of the things he came up with was making the page number on the PDF be a hyperlink back to the table of contents. And I was like, oh, brilliant. I'm stealing that. Right. Like, totally taking that out. So that's the kind of thing. I'm constantly looking at different products from that perspective. What ideas can I learn from this in terms of presentation or actual ways of making the content more engaging or whatever?
And that's an interesting one to hear because it's particular to the digital world. It's like,
right.
I don't think of stuff like that because I prefer actual books. I haven't quite taken the PDFs in the same way.
Well, I describe to people sometimes it's like you reach a certain point where I go to a restaurant and we both get a menu, right? But when I look at the menu, I'm seeing a 4-column table that has this kind of headers, and note that this column is all italics and this other column is bolded, and this and that, like how they've put the art is, there's like a ribbon of foliage between these two charts, and there's this and that. Like I don't even see the food items that much anymore.
Right.
I'll have the wings or whatever and move on. But what I notice is the layout design of the menu. Like that's one of the curses of getting to a certain level of production, is that everything you see comes through that lens.
I can really see where that gets to, because in a similar way, having dabbled in some writing, it's very hard to watch a TV show or movie or read a book without critiquing it in the same way. It's like once you've gotten into making sausage, you always got to pay attention to how the sausage is made.
One of my criticisms of visual medium in general is that all of them should have some role-playing game person on staff to say, is there an obvious solution that you would do if you were playing D&D in this instance? Because they'll have some situation and I'll be like, no way, just build a fire at the mouth of the cave and smoke them out. There's no reason why you should chase those people down into dark caverns. Like, don't do it. You should just collapse that. You should set that on fire.
Collapse that tunnel. Why are we messing around? Is there anything down there that we really need?
I had to quit watching Walking Dead because I live in Georgia, and it's set in Georgia, and the fact that the zombie apocalypse has been going on for more than 3 days, and everybody isn't armed with a spear, right? So within 3 days, every single person who's alive still should have a spear. I mean, we're in a temperate woodland.
Yeah,
you can get as many spears as you need. Like there's no shortage. If this was in Albuquerque, maybe everybody wouldn't have a spear. But like things like that. Like I can't stand it anymore. I'm watching this. I'm like, why isn't he having a spear? He could kill all these guys with a spear. There'd be no problem.
I did not grok that moment myself, and now that you see it, I see it's manifestly untrue. I mean, I own 2 spears myself. They're sitting right on the wall opposite me, and so I'm really, in retrospect, I realize that's why I hated Walking Dead, is the no spears.
Yeah,
You know,
you can
but a
buy.
girl has a katana, right?
I was looking this up for like to get a length that I was going to use on a chart somewhere for how long the spear was going to be, and I was looking at different spears, and there was an ad for Amazon. You can buy off Amazon a boar spear with the crossbar and like a huge 10-foot boar spear, and have it delivered to your house.
Yeah, I
What a
have
time to be
twice.
alive. I mean, holy crap! You know,
I have twice. I'll bring it out on screen sometime. But yeah,
like
it's
60
brilliant.
bucks. I'm like, holy crap! $60 you can get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So one day I'm sitting around the house and a Amazon package shows up. It's addressed to my wife. I open it up, and inside is an actual full size gladius.
Oh wow!
Right? And I'm like, honey, did you buy a sword online? And she's like, oh, well, that was for you. A sword? No, I didn't. But I bought you a knife. So she thought she was buying me a cute little knife, you know, like a Yu-Gi-Oh, right? And didn't realize, yeah, it's a full on gladius. It's like 2.5 feet long. And nice. It's from the Cold Steel Company, which is, if I remember correct, the same company that makes the boar spears I bought.
Awesome.
No, I got to shout this out here for a couple of adventurers. My Bro XT contract obligates me to remind you all that 1-to-1 is always required. Now, point the bros here so we have documented proof that you have lived up to your contractual obligation. And then my buddy Dan, a couple lines later, mentions, just like the Sabbat, which Dan's one of my old players from my Vampire LARP days, which ironically 1-to-1 time coincides with, and I think is a beautiful time to segue into Shadow City.
Yeah.
To set that up, did you have any experience with the World of Darkness and the Vampire role-playing games before taking on this project?
I did. I didn't do LARPing. That's a bridge too far for me. I'm not that much of a theater kid. But I played.
For shame.
Yeah,
it's never too late.
I played Vampire quite a bit for a period, and I'm very familiar with it. I played the first PC game was kind of short-lived, but Bloodlines, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, I played for a long time.
Yes,
and I thought it was an excellent game, and it made me for years. I would think of different ways that I could solve the kind of what I think of as like a mapping problem. That let's say you're in Vampire Bloodlines and you're walking down the street, and the game might model 20 buildings, but only 3 of those buildings the door works.
Right. Yeah.
Now in a role-playing game, that's no good. You know, you can't just tell them, oh, the door doesn't work. They want to get into that building and find out what's in that building. And so I came up with a few solutions over the years that I wasn't happy with. One of them was kind of creating a blocks where you're mapping it by city block. And then I was like, well, that really only works if you're in like a New York type city. There's a lot of cities where it's not going to be applicable. And then I had another thing where I went through, I was trying to make like a side view map of a skyscraper where you had like stacked up levels like a dungeon, and you could create branches off of the dungeon, and I could never make it work the way that I wanted to. And then
it sounds kind of like an arcology concept to borrow from
exactly. But the problem became, well, then how are you going to map all of these skyscrapers in a top-down look on the city and all this? So it didn't work. And then back early at the beginning of the year, I don't even remember what I saw or read, but I just had this idea of like, what if I did it the way that it is in Shadow Dark with making the districts of the city in Shadow. And so in Shadow Dark, you roll dice on the paper and then you draw around the dice. And that's like, this is the market district, and this is the slums, and this is the temple or whatever it is. And yeah, and you mapped it like that, and I think I just, somebody said something, and I thought about it, and I was like, wait a minute. So Shadow City uses that kind of system to create a unique city every time. There's 20 possible neighborhood types, and you roll 10. 10 is recommended. You could roll as many as you want. You could use every type, but like if you roll 10 20-sided dice, you get 10 neighborhoods like that. And then the die number tells you what it is. So it might be a harbor, it might be a university, it might be a industrial district, it might be a finance district, whatever. And then
Right.
that creates the city. And if there's a harbor, so if you don't get a harbor, it's like a terrestrial city. Maybe you could have a river going through it if you want
Yeah.
it. But if you have the harbor, then there's like draw some black water around the city. Here you go. And one of the critical things for me is that it needed to be something that you could do without campaign cartographer or some huge mapping program, right? Like,
Yes.
I wanted it to be something you could make on a piece of paper and move on. If you want to map it like Dyson Logos maps or something, then go for it. But it doesn't have to be that way. So the city gets made like that, and then I created a system for populating the hexes within each neighborhood with points of interest. So each neighborhood, you roll a d4. So you get between 1 and 4 points of interest. So that means some neighborhoods are going to be much more dense and valuable than other neighborhoods, because the number of points of interest, if you control the whole neighborhood as the vampire, you get to collect like a blood rent, basically.
Nice.
So it puts the prince of the city, the other vampires of the city that are sitting on good real estate, they're collecting that blood rent. And so as the underdog, you're wanting to take that from them, puts you in direct conflict with them. So that kind of drives the conflict between vampires. But then there's all sorts of other stuff in the city that you have to, if there's a werewolf in that neighborhood, you have to take out that werewolf before you can get the blood rent. So it puts all those things in play to turn it into a territorial battle between these guys. I'm going to be on Dundermoose tomorrow at 9, and we're going to talk about it as like a Bronstein, like running it as PvP,
Yes.
giving the different neighborhoods to the different players, vampires, and then they have to go to war. And one of the things, like this is in Vampire the Masquerade, it's not my idea, but that the vampire could feed some blood to a human, and it gives them a boosted amount of characteristics and makes them tougher, a lot tougher.
The ghoul.
That's called a ghoul. Yeah. And well, if you're running it like a Bronstein, you're creating lieutenants that way, right?
Yeah.
You're creating these guys, and then they become the people that you give downtime order. Go do this while I'm sleeping today. Go do that, and you have all those people working as your agents. And so it becomes, when the players are unified in like a normal party GM situation,
yes,
then they're working together to control, so they can control more territory. But then the more, it's kind of like Sopranos, again, a great example. The more there is to divide up, the more conflicts you're going to have about, hey, that's my thing over there. You've created a problem for me. You need to compensate me for this problem you've created. Then that drives, even within a normal game, some degree of player conflict, because they're all competing over similar resources. So the game has a Shadow Dark level of character design that is unconnected to any kind of lore. So you don't have to, you can come in and I can hand you a character sheet, and I guarantee that, if I take Patty and I hand Patty the character sheet and I've already filled it out, he might have 2 questions, and then be ready to go, right? Like, I mean, like the number of things he's not going to automatically just figure out
into it
very
from
small.
seeing the sheet. Yeah.
And so I could just hand him the sheet and walk. Now, that's an advantage in my view for new players as well as veterans. I mean, I've said many times one of the curses of being a game designer is that you don't just that's good to hear. You don't just remember the iteration of the rules that you published. You remember every iteration of the rules that you came up with. So if you originally said that having this trait gives you a +3 bonus, but then you brought it down to a +1 bonus, and then you raised it up, you're like, that's too low. You bring it up to a +2. Your brain is simultaneously remembering all 3 of those states, and you're like, I can't remember what I decided.
What did I settle on?
Yeah. And so it's really convenient, even as a veteran player. This is one of the things I think is one of the biggest advantages of Shadow Dark for old school veteran players, is that the amount of new things to learn is very low. I love X2, so I'm not crapping on it in any way here.
Right.
But introducing X2 even to a new veteran player is daunting, whereas introducing Shadow Dark to a new person is almost effortless.
Right. I haven't had the pleasure of introducing a brand new player to Shadow Dark, but the more experienced players I've exposed it to, have taken to it very positively. And I think you're right. It's great because it's a system that allows you to forget things, not have to remember more new things.
And to build on what Patty said about the 90% chance, that's another thing that I think is good. In Vampire the Masquerade, if you spend an hour and a half making this character and you're balancing all these dots out and you're like, this is perfect. This is what I want. If that guy dies in the first 20 minutes, you're going to be really mad. But if you just pressed a button and got a character like that, like, who cares if that guy dies?
Right, yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, man, all that time I invested in rolling up, I'm going to have to press the button again.
I mean, it's no problem. So we had, funny aside, go back to Gods of the Forbidden North. We went into a dungeon, and my friend Carrie, his character came up and found a pit trap, and he didn't fall in. It opened, but he pulled back. And he jumped over the pit trap, and then he got shot with a poison arrow trap on the other side and died. The pit trap resets itself using some kind of mechanism. He made a new character. We came back to the same dungeon. He forgot where the trap was, and he fell down and died in the same trap that he jumped over last time to die. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. I was crying.
Oh, my gosh. In my head, I've got that old foghorn, leghorn running in my head. Like, what kind of trap is this? I can step in it and nothing happens. I can make off with the bait and nothing happens. I can jump over and nothing.
Oh my God! We just couldn't believe it. He was like he moved his token right on top of it, and one of the other characters was like, "Wait!" He fell down. It's so good.
Now, one thing before we keep rolling ahead, I wanted to highlight the thing that excites me most about Shadow City is the fact that you've provided a bunch of setting-based tables that allow the world to emerge. Because if there is one great failing of all the traditional World of Darkness materials, it's that no matter what, even if you buy their setting books and splat books and use them, right, there is so much heavy lifting to be done for the GM in terms of locations,
that was one of the things
characters.
that Black Lodge was really talking to me the most about. They were like, this is such a great GM support system, so that the GM doesn't have to do it. And I'll just to give an example here, I can screen share this. This is a tourist district encounter table, and every single one of these could be almost a full session if you wanted, except for like the first one of like you find valuables. But
yes, I've had similar things turn into full sessions all the time.
Yeah. You have a construction crane drops heavy things all over the place. That could turn into long interaction of all these people are coming, and you have to get out of get out of this place. This is an
And yet,
emergency
it's a
situation.
great opportunity to hang around and maybe feed.
Exactly, that too, right?
Yeah.
You've got all these monster encounters that are bolded, right? That could come out. You've got there's a guy committed suicide in a hotel bathtub, and the water is overflowing and pouring off the balcony. Like all these different things that could just happen, and
Yeah.
take the game in a different way. So, in addition to the kind of territorial control that you're going after, all of these complications are being added all the time. A pushy person in a costume comes up and demands that you pay them for taking pictures. I don't know how many people have been to New York, but that is a thing that happens in Times Square, big time. All these different things that could just push it in a different direction. So I think even though the game to me is really about like long term figuring out how to manage this territory and how you're going to do that. And the dungeons get created, the buildings get created like dungeons. They get built out using a node mapping system. And so you have to kind of clear them in order to gain control of that location. And so there's kind of like a wargaming, clear and hold territory kind of game process. But then all of the role-playing stuff is happening concurrent with that. So problems are occurring. You've got enemies and friends and tons of things that are going on. And every time you cross over into a new neighborhood, you're rolling encounters, you're doing this stuff. Anything could happen.
And again, the strength.
To dump a body and you roll a thing where there's a teenage couple that was kissing and they come around the corner and see you guys and freak out and run off. And now you're like, we got to hunt down these fucking teenagers and do we kill the teenagers? How do we handle this problem? Like all those kind of complication issues while you're trying to do the things that
I just came over here trying to feed, and all of a sudden I've got orphaned runaway teenagers being tracked down by a werewolf or something like that. And again, the beautiful thing is again going back to my own experience in conventional tabletop, World of Darkness, Vampire, what have you. None of that stuff happens unless it's being scripted by the storyteller, and so it's beautiful to have things that throw curveballs, because my experience has told me that's what makes, when it comes to the traditional vampire thing, that's what makes the LARPing superior to the tabletop game, because all kinds of weird convergences and cross interests arise out of having a large group of players all pursuing their characters' individual interests.
Yeah. Well, I just I know it's a big thing in Atlanta. I just don't have that performative, outgoing person in me.
It takes a certain type. It does. And to be honest, also it's I'm very much with the Black Lodge Games guys in that, I love Vampire in the World of Darkness. But the worst thing about it are its fans. Like I by the time I got out of LARPing, I came to detest the way the game was played. And and that's a sad and honest truth. But in the LARPing circle, I know that Atlanta is famous for its LARPing scene, and that one of the organizations I would play in that has been going strong for nigh on 30 years, possibly a little bit more. And there are characters in the game that are that old. There's people that have been playing the same characters for 25 or 30 years. It's insane. Wow. But in a similar way, they have kind of become very stratified, almost ossified in their way of doing things. So there's not a lot of the same draw that was in the early days, a lot of liveliness.
Yeah. And that one of the things that I tried to do here, and lean away from all of that. I hesitate to use this word, but I will. Pretentiousness of putting everything like that. Everything has to be these very arcane, lore relevant things. You know, that this guy fought in the Revolutionary War, and then he did this and he did that, and it's all like. I went through a lot of the supplements to make sure that there were, like, if there was a cool idea, I wanted to preserve some of it. You know, like the idea of a guy who used a particular power or had some particular thing. I'd be like, okay, that'd be cool. For instance, one of them had I forget which one it was. I had an elder who had like blood powers that interacted with plants. And I didn't remember that in any of the things when I was playing or anything like that. But I did put that in as one talent that you could get for a particular class, because like you could, you know, I thought it was like, it's different. It's cool. Somebody could think of different ways of using how they could, you know, they can use supernatural control of plants to some degree to get some outcome. And that kind of thing. But my point was, going through all those books, the amount of stuff that you would have to memorize in order to run some of these, you know, certain cities by night, or various, what were presented as kind of like intro adventures in the way that they were talking about them. And they were the most complex intro adventures I'd ever read. And I'm like, holy crap, this is detailed. And a lot of them were contingent on certain things working a particular way. And I'm like, what if it doesn't work that way? What do you do? And I know from my experience with OSR characters, you know, people will just break whatever plan you have very, very quickly. And so I wanted to make sure that you could have a system that adapted to that. And, you know, let's say that early on the players are very successful and they take over a couple of valuable neighborhoods. There might be some people who'd be like, well, they're getting too powerful too quickly. This is a problem. Gonna, you know, whatever. Let it ride. Let them see what they can do with it. Like that to me is the kind of old school thing. Like okay, they won. They walked up and killed the guy that you were going to have as your big bad. Okay.
Right.
How would the world evolve from there?
Yeah. And at the same time, this isn't a video game where, well, that's the end of the storyline we thought up. That's it.
That's
you know,
right.
No, that like you're the king now. You're the head of this location or what have you, this faction. What do you do now that you're in charge? And we've talked about that in other shows too, that high level play gets really overlooked because there's just fewer games get there, and the few games that do get there very often suffer from we don't actually know what to do when we're there. You know, now that we're 18th level or whatever, we're in the epic tier of D&D, crawling dungeons does not bring the thrill it once did.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And
now you mentioned the term prince earlier, right?
Yeah.
That implies to me that you have come up with some sort of a political structure for vampiric society. Did you copy the Camarilla, or what did you actually do?
It's very bare bones. And just to basically define terms for the GM to use and people understand what they're talking about, right? So the prince is just the most powerful vampire in the city who has the greatest vested interest in there not being problems, right? So if you start doing masquerade violations, to use the term, the game has an apocalypse timer that every time there are big violations, it moves that timer forward, and eventually all the vampires will get murdered by the humans. So you want to keep this thing a secret. And so the prince is there so that in the beginning, particularly, if the players are doing stuff that is gonna be, really a problem for themselves, even that they're doing that. The prince is kind of a way of the GM coming in and going, no, you really can't do that, and not in a Deus Ex Machina thing of like, I'm going to show up like a fairy and fix all your problems. Like, no, like the prince will just come murder you, and then like that's like you've fucked up. The prince has murdered you. And your new character will need to learn to not do those things, right?
Right, or else the murdering will
continue. Yes,
and that if I could pass on one tidbit of advice to anyone who's running Vampire for the first time, it would be set a definitive line of once the players cross that line, they are just gone. And that was something I was a bit lax on when I was running a LARP and other stuff, that a player did something and the world at large should have just eliminated them. Like I can think of players where I should have just seen them the next session and said, okay, you're gone, start a new character. And even you don't know what happened to you. No one knows what happened to you, not even you. Right?
That is new. I haven't heard that one. Yeah, you're gone and you don't even know.
And even you don't know what happened to you. That's the thing.
To add to the kind of there being a prince, there's also a term for Elysium where you can have meetings without the risk of violence and talk things out. So if the players are messing with another vampire, there might be a meeting arranged in Elysium to talk about it before it turns into you all get murdered. And then I added a thing of having a part of the city called the Tartarus, which is like the hell version of the opposite of Elysium. And in Tartarus, you can kill anybody and there's no real masquerade consequence. So it's always, so it's always a place where there's not going to be anybody there at night. Like the example I use in the book is the biological preserve on the edge of the city. Like if you take somebody out there and whack them, then you don't have to worry about there being a masquerade violation. And you could arrange to meet out there so that they know, like, if they try to start a fight, you'll be okay to end them, and they won't be protected by anything.
Has a question. How strong are the humans and hunters?
There are leveled. Let me back up my
excellent
book, and if I go to opponent stats. Okay, so this is the first page. I'm going to do a screen share here of mortals. So the opponents chapter is organized by type. So we just got through all the mages. The witch is the last of the mages, and there's a criminal mortal that's level 2, like a level 2 monster in Shadowdark. There's a fanatic that's like a level 1 monster. Okay. Hunters are like level 3. They know more about you. They can paralyze you with a stake. They have Molotov grenades. They're much more of a dangerous opponent. And then there's an Inquisitor that's like a level 4. So even if you guys were higher level, I mean, if 10 Inquisitors show up, that's going to be a big problem. They're gonna cause some damage. Then there's kind of an officer and a soldier that are level 2 and 4, but it goes into undead next. So none of the mortals are above level 4, but mortals can appear in very large numbers. So,
yes, they can.
In one of the play tests, they went into a hospital, and just randomly they went into a room and it had 12 gang members in it that were there. One of their gang members had been wounded, and they were there taking care, like showing support for him. And a fight broke out because they rolled, I think, like a 3 or a 2 on a reaction check.
Okay.
And this fight broke out, and they were vampires. I think one of them was even level 2, but the real advantage of the vampire is the ability to heal damage. But in terms of like just fighting hand to hand or something, they're not like that much better. And so having 4 player characters versus 12, 12 attacks per round was really intense. And so they couldn't just resolve it without vampire powers. So they started having to use vampire powers. They ended up killing a few of them and then escaping.
Right.
But now all of those guys are a potential violation. And so they had to hunt all of them down before daybreak, because if they didn't, once there's another daybreak cycle, whatever the cost is of covering it up doubles. So if you let something go for 3 days, you're looking at like a massive
4 times,
bring it under control.
4 times, 8 times increase.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Yeah, so it creates like whatever else they had planned for the night, that went away because they had to kill all of those guys right away. At the beginning of the game, coming up with $200 like level 1 is a pretty significant challenge.
Right.
But if you have to pay a $200 price per person who saw you in order to cover up, bribing the newspaper people and covering all the you can't afford that. So what will happen is the prince will come and kill you, and then he will pay to cover it up after he kills you.
Yes.
Right. So and then your new characters will be like, hey, did you hear about the last guys that they went into the hospital and they're gone, man.
Yes.
They got wiped out, right? So that's the kind of thing. It's just all the mechanics in the game are set up to create an intense pressure on the players that makes it so they can't stand still. And one of the things that I really, really admire about Alien, the Alien RPG from Free League, is that there are all these mechanics in place so that you cannot just coast along. Like if you are not improving the situation, it is getting worse. And in a very alien way, you could just be killed for getting separated from the party. I mean, like all these different things. So I really like having mechanical pressure on the players. Every night they're losing blood just because of kind of a natural entropy. So they have to feed. They have to do every time. If you use them, blood power that costs 2 blood points, and then you use another blood power that costs 3 blood points, that's like feeding on 2 or 3 people to get that back, and that takes time. So there's only 12 hours per night, and now you're going to have to be spending 4 or 5 hours doing hunting checks and and you can't work on the other things you want to do.
And many people, the first time they play Vampire, they lean into what they've seen in movies. So they kind of think that, we're just going to stop a bus and murder everybody on it. And then just, nothing happens. And the world is not that way at all. It's no, they're going to be like, for one, a busload of mortals can probably kill you because you're really not that much stronger than mortals. And 2, how are you going to explain that much blood missing? And again, mortals tend not to forget about a busload of people showing up dead or going missing.
That's right. Yeah. I'm very familiar with Inigo Montoya. I don't know who Indigo Montoya is.
So you just had I put this on a YouTube comment for who were you with last night? Was it Dundermoose? Or is that's tomorrow
Harmony
night?
Ginger.
Right. So just recently there was talking about pardon me, it was a Dundermoose stream. It wasn't you, but it was I mentioned this rule in another one. But in the LARP scene, this is one of the aspects of PvP that hasn't been talked about much, is when you have players that can go after one another, and not only is it able to in a LARP, that's your primary source of conflict. Is the players going after one another. Well, it became a thing early on where I got killed by player, the Tremere guy over here, the Tremere Primogen. I got killed. In the next game, I show up with a new character and I rolled up my character. My entire goal in life is to kill that specific Tremere,
Yep.
right? So we created something called the Inigo Montoya rule, which, being a joke, it's my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my previous character. Prepare to die.
Yeah.
Right? Disallowed. Can't do it. As a matter of fact, we require you to play your character wrong if even if you naturally come across something that would cause you to go after that person. I usually let a statute of limitations, but that is one of the things is hard feelings develop out of character between the players, cliques develop, and before you know it, you deal with a lot of headaches and heartaches that are just players complaining about other players. And that's one of the behaviors we nipped in the bud.
I don't have anything specific in the game about that. I would say that would need to be something that GM leans into. And one of the things you can do is, if you're going into it like it's a Bronstein or something, you just accept when you come into it. Like, if you lose, then that's what happened.
Right.
And you have to rise above that. But I mean, that's a kind of an innate part of humanity that people are vengeance seeking. I don't know that you could solve it mechanically. You'd have to just solve it socially, of just.
And that was the thing, really it's a social thing that needed to be dealt with. And even though we had that rule, that problem would still crop up from time to time. And you also find that in a situation like that, you will run into players who they do not get along, and their characters always come into conflict no matter what, but that's one of the.
I've never been as involved with it as some people, maybe, but then.
Right.
Dundermoose has developed a bit of a reputation that I've heard of being a crafty fellow.
A great case in point.
Yeah. And so he said that people have kind of come after him preemptively because they think that he's going to do that. When I played Europa Universalis 2, like I was mentioning earlier, and it was competitive multiplayer, one of the things that we did was we made that work kind of to our advantage, in that as a player, you would develop a trustworthiness, so that if I'm France and I make a deal with England in this game and I betray them, then in the next game, people are going to be very reluctant to sign treaties with me, to make deals and stuff like that. So in that way, it's working in the opposite. It's the opposite of an Inigo Montoya. It's I don't trust you because of previous things. I'm not going to go after you because of that, but I'm not going to put myself in a position where I trust you. And
that is also true.
Yeah, and I think that could be a thing that over time you might develop reputation that will hurt you. So don't betray people in that manner, because they will remember that. And that's kind of honor among thieves that is more appropriate for, like, medieval rulers than it is for vampires. But having a degree of honor and dignity benefits you as a player. Other people will give you the benefit of the doubt and so on. So I think there's a positive way out of it. Yeah.
My experience is also that dealing with that at a tabletop game where it's a group of less than 10 even sitting around the table, it's a lot easier to work it out interpersonally. Once you get to 20 or 30 or more players, you just don't have the time to intercede in that way in every disagreement that can come up. But that's been the trend I've seen, is that's the downside of PvP. And that's one of the things that needs to be addressed. You can extol the virtues of PvP all you want, but I've seen it ruin sessions. I've seen it ruin campaigns. I've seen it ruin friendships, and that's.
When I wrote the game, my presumption was that the coterie would work together. that would be a team. And it wasn't until a couple weeks ago that I was watching a Dunder video, and I was like, oh, you could run it, you could separate it out and put a different player in charge of each neighborhood, and then it would work. It could work like this. And it didn't occur because I don't play that way personally at my table.
Right.
I do think there's also a solo play application.
In
that because the game generates all the threats randomly, you could GM this on yourself with a simple oracle and solve your problem. Just move.
To be honest, that's the first thing I plan on doing with it once I get it in my hot little hands is I'm going to be soloing something and testing, because again, that's one of the reasons I'd like solo play is because it gives you a way to play test how the game works, and that way it gives you that book control that is talked about. You become more familiar with it, and every character that you solo play then becomes an NPC for you to use later.
That's right. Yeah.
Got it. And we're running a little short on time, but this is a great question. Tell us more about your social vampire structure. Older vampires versus younger, bigger cities versus village princes. Do you have much to share on that front?
The game is kind of assuming, and I think this is one of the things that Vampire Masquerade really gets right from a lore perspective, is because you're such a limited mobility as a vampire.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense that you would be moving between cities very often, if at all. It seems to me like it would be a one-way trip, and then you would be in the new place as a new character. It would not be like I'm going to move here and I'm going to go like in a D&D game where you're moving between towns and stuff like that.
Right.
So the reason like you're presumed to be living in your shadow city, right? And everything is built from that standpoint. But in terms of social structure, the game, because I know people would want to add this way, the game has a clan or faction system. So clans is just the term you use if it's vampires. But the faction system overall is just you can create talent sharing so that like everybody, an example I use is like the FBI or the CIA, like everybody that's a normal officer in the game that I showed earlier, right? That the police officer guy, he has that level of skills. But if that is an FBI officer, then he'll have an extra talent that you've defined as being for the FBI. He can pick locks, and he can interrogate people really well, and he can do this. He has much better attack bonus and this and that and the other. So you can create human organizations like that. You could make I forget the name. Was it Leopold? Something Leopold, right? Society of Leopold.
Oh yes.
You could make a Society of Leopold talent that has all these different things, and you could give that to a bunch of what would have been low-level monsters, basically,
right?
And they become much more powerful threats to the player characters. And
yes,
the way that the vampire clans would work is that it would then become an inheritable trait, not just a talent. So if my character joins a clan and gets that talent, then every vampire that I create beneath that would gain that talent as well. And I didn't want to encourage people to exploit it, so I didn't really talk about this, but you could create nested clans where you keep focusing the blood and getting more and more powerful ability. So like you could have a big clan of everybody in the city that follows the prince, so to speak. And then there could be the guys in this neighborhood have worked on an even further advanced power. So they have the big talent for everybody, but then they have this more powerful talent that's more specific. And you could keep nesting it to where you could use that to model generations, like DMG is talking about. You could use that to do stuff that all the tools are there. One of the reasons why I didn't build things in automatically is because of what we talked about earlier with making it open to a new player. I don't want the new player to come in and have to learn that this organization gives you this town and this organ, and if you, are you going to pick this clan or that clan or whatever. If the GM wants to start everybody and then they start learning those things in game, in world, like there, if you, then they could go and maybe supplicate to whoever and get admitted into that clan, get that power. That would be very useful to them, right? But I don't want it to be a required thing, because the more required stuff you get, then the more complex the game is. And that, that one of the big virtues of Shadowdark is you don't even need to know what continent you're on. You don't need to know anything. You could be in this town in the forest. Like it doesn't matter. You don't even need to know where you are. And you can run the game. It's not forgotten.
It's again. And if you lower that barrier of entry, again, like you said, you can create a character in minutes. The setting itself emerges out of the die rolls as you play. That has eliminated almost all of the barrier of entry that the World of Darkness and normal Vampire requires, which is just brilliant. Okay, we're in our last couple minutes. I want to drop the link to Shadow City here in the chat again. And the Kickstarter launches tomorrow. Go ahead and share some details.
Tomorrow at 4:00 Eastern time, I'm going to be on with Dungeons and Dyslexia. He was part of the play. He was in one of the playtest groups, and it's his guys in the UK that played it. And so I was like, I want you to be front and center with the deployment. So we're gonna turn it on live tomorrow afternoon, and I'd love to see that too, Ultra. That's great. So we're going to turn it on at 4, and he's told me that if it can get funded in an hour, he has a special gift that he's going to give away. So let's get it funded in an hour. It's only $1,000 goal, because the book's ready. It's print on demand. The PDF is loaded at DriveThru. As soon as the thing funds, I just release everything.
Pow, press the button.
The virtue of getting in on the Kickstarter is that the price for paying now will be lower than when it goes onto DriveThru. So there's that advantage. So we're going to launch that, and then that's at 4, and then at 9 I'm going to be on with Dunder, and we're going to talk about other applications of the system, to being the PvP and the Bronstein. So
brilliant.
Yeah. So I really think, I haven't mentioned Mike Scuddifer. A lot of people in your audience will know who he is. He has talked. I've shown him the same file I showed you. He's been working on it from a solo play angle, and is going to talk about trying to solo play. I'm not sure what the timeline is for him making that video, but so there, it's a very flexible system, just like like the Shadowdark system it comes out of. Like it can move in all these different ways depending on how you want to play the game. That's to me the heart of the pitch, is that it's a toolbox for you to make whatever vampire game you want to make. You could reproduce all the clans from Masquerade in the clan system, and then tell the players what they are and run it that way. You could have your own clans that you invent, that you put in there. You could have no clans. It doesn't matter. Everything is built the way you want to build it, and that the problems that I have with Vampire the Masquerade is that there are so many decisions that are closed. And in this game, all the decisions are open for you to fill in whatever it is that you want. That's the beauty of the OSR, that you can, Kelsey releases Shadowdark, and I come out with the player companion that has 36 classes to use it. Like anybody can build off of the foundation, but the foundation needs to be flexible and open so that will work. And I think that has been what Vampire the Masquerade has lacked for 30 years now.
Absolutely,
it's a long time.
All right. Those of you who want to follow and hear all the stuff that you have to say, very interesting things, I might add, where can they find you?
Most everything I do is on Twitter. I do make some posts on Facebook if you want to find me there. I'm under my name, Greg Christopher, instead of Chubby Funster.
Got it.
I also have a YouTube channel that I don't post that much to. I do post occasionally to it, but I'm not really a performer in that sense.
Right. So
I'd rather put my time, if I'm going to spend 4 hours making a thing, I'd rather it be a print thing that can be distributed. So I don't really
makes
talk
sense.
about a lot of my, I make some marketing videos, but that's about it. But yeah, most everything is on X. And the reason is that X is the most free and controlled by the user social media that I know of. If
Yes.
something came along that was even better than that, I would go with it. But
Right.
the ability to like a post without everybody seeing that you liked the post, the ability to control all this is what you see. You get to see what you want. You get to there's much less intrusions into your experience by the system, and it's just been great compared to all of the prior social media stuff I've used. So I make the pitch. Thank you, Moritz. You use X. Come find me on X. We'll talk about anything.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I play Mothership with Mo. This is Mo from Berlin. I play Mothership
Oh, okay, awesome.
with Scudder for Mike being our storyteller, our game master. All right, and as you just mentioned, I myself am, after we wrap this stream up, I'm going to be on the Dundermoose channel at 9 p.m. tonight to talk about Diplomacy by X. So if you haven't got enough of me, which I don't blame you. I don't blame you for not getting enough of me. Just tune into Dundermoose this evening for an extra dose.
Do you have any kind of goofy hat or glasses that you could wear on this Dundermoose?
I have an entire selection of hats, which
I have. You know how he is.
I do know how he is. I don't have funny glasses.
I've seriously considered getting a fake mustache for when I go on there tomorrow, like a big fuzzy mustache. I don't know that I could wear it for 2 hours or whatever, but
it's the thought that
he's a great guy. He's got
maybe it's time to get those like Instagram filters that'll put mustache on you. Hey, no discomfort on your that. Because you're not cool enough, Jeremy. I don't know. Actually, you'd have to reach out to Scudder for Mike. That game is for the Scudder for Mike channel members. So hit me up separately. I'll fill you in on the details and how you can get in on that. But once again, I'm Jack. This is Greg Christopher, the Chubby Funster. This has been a fantastic fucking talk, sir.
Thank you. Great.
Any parting words for our lovely audience?
Make more stuff. Make whatever you're making for as a GM and your own home game, do what you can to put it into a publishable version. Even if you're just publishing it on social media, get it out of your individual life and out into the world.
That's right. And I agree with Patty. That is awesome advice. Make stuff. Make stuff. All right. Thank you so much, sir. We're going to end the stream here. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you.